Hey everybody, I know I'm early. I know. I'm early and I feel like I look dark, but I won't really be able to tell until somebody pops on, which may or may not happen because I'm early. I'm an hour early again. My mother called me and just literally about a half an hour ago, and she's like, "We're going to dinner with old school people." A family who I used to go to high school with. And come to dinner. I'm like, well, what time? It was like 5:30. And I was like, okay, you don't say no to your mama sometimes. Sometimes you just say yes, mother. And so I said yes, mother. And that meant I had to come on early. And so, hello, we are early. My glasses are wonky. No, I have still not found my glasses. They're in here somewhere. They're in here somewhere is all I have to say. Yes, mom comes first. Yep. Sometimes you just say yes, mother, and you don't argue, right? So we're coming on an hour early so that I can be done by 5, freshen up, and meet them at the restaurant at 5:30 because my mama said so, and I listened to my mama. New webcam. It is actually not a new webcam. People do ask that. This is not a new webcam. It's a new angle. It's an old angle that I used to use a while back. It's kind of bothering me actually at the moment. I used to use it at this angle before. I think it sometimes allows lights to come in and the blackness of the shelves doesn't dampen everything down, which causes it to be crisper. But it's actually not a new. It's not new. I highly recommend this as a webcam. It's a Logitech. It's fantastic. It's just stuck up on my computer, which isn't my favorite. But I haven't taken the time to sort out some camera issues because I'm having computer issues. And So there we go. So if you're just popping on, yes, I'm an hour early. Yes, I'm aware of it. My mama told me to do it so I could meet her for dinner with family friends. And so that is what I am doing. So I do want to show you something. This is just like randomly show you something right out the gate. But look at what Miss Jasmina sent me this. She occasionally sends me some cool things. But you know, next month is Embrace the Magical and the Truth and Story World. My world is Embrace the Magical all year long. But my friend Patrick, when he used to have a YouTube channel, we did Embrace the Magical a few years ago, and we do it every single year now. So there'll be all kinds of Embrace the Magical stuff going on video-wise, and a big long chat around Halloween time. And so this is Embrace the Magical. This is like the epitome of Embrace the Magical. So it's an Edgar Allan Poe 7-day candle, but look at the back. Look at the back. It says Saints Day, January 19. Let's see. Patron saint of bohemians, cryptography, and detectives. It says, Saint Edgar, you gave speech to the disquiet that sleeps within us all and wakes in dread. You bequeathed us your figments and eurekas. Despite affliction, while broke and broken-hearted, you sounded mysteries ephemeral and eternal of this world and others near at hand. Grant us the courage to trust our works will weather the libels of rivals, and the belief we will thrive in legend, if not in life. Savature in moto for teacher and I do not. That's probably Latin, and I slaughtered it, and I have no clue what that says. Light the candle responsibly. How cool is that? This is going on my Embrace Magical shelf. Miss Maureen had sent me, I can't see it from here right now, but I have a Nevermore candle, and those will definitely be promptly displayed on my Embrace the Magical shelf next month. Yes, Unashi, I am definitely on early. It was very, very last minute. So we're just rolling with it. We're just rolling with it. We're rolling. So in the spirit of just rolling into stuff, right? I got my desk is an absolute mess. And I feel like things are going to start to fall. But let me just move the scissors so that if the scissors fall, it doesn't stab my feet, because I am barefoot as always. The topic of the hour is going to be, and I'm trying to give people a little bit of a chance to come in, because most people aren't going to have a clue that I've started early, and I feel bad, but it's, what are we going to do? We have to, as I said, sometimes we got to roll with the punches and roll with interruptions in life, especially when it's your beautiful mother who's requesting your presence. My mother doesn't ask for a whole lot, so I'm going to stick that in there, clear up a little bit of space, and just give a second here in case anybody else pops in. And maybe somebody will let them know if they come in while I'm babbling away and don't see them why we're early and what we're doing here. But the topic of the first hour is going to be masculine and feminine energy. Hello there, Mr. Joe. Hello, everybody that's coming in to this early live chat. It's interesting because I think that the concept of using, so let's see, let's center, because I am now an hour early myself, and usually I kind of prepare my brain for walking into the conversation. So let me think about this for a minute. So in my practice and in the way that I see the world around me, everything that I do is centered around energy, right? So the 4 elements are types of energy, the 5 elements, if you work with spirit or source or aether or whatever you do with that 5th one. Some people use the 5th element, some people don't. Those are different types of energy. And then, so those are types of energy that we work with in the nature, as well as in more of an esoteric sense when we're doing readings. So we have modern tarot decks usually have the 4 elements as the basis of their 4 suits, right? And so we work with those 4 elements in that sort of psychological, esoteric way. But those 4 elements are also elements, of course, that are existing in the world around us. And so those explain types of energy. But when we look at what would traditionally have been called masculine and feminine energy, we're talking about not so much about what is the energy, but how is the energy moving? What is the energy doing? What is the quality of the energy? Now, when you get into older texts, which we're not rolling there this time around, we're just going to talk about masculine and feminine energy. They would talk about this sort of masculine feminine energy, but they would also talk about the quality of energy in terms of whether it was moist or dry. So those were qualifications also of energy. And then there were other things as well. So there were ways in which energy, the 4 elements, were talked about. So, so we have that going. So it's more about how is the energy moving. So masculine energy traditionally is active energy, right? It is yang energy. If you're familiar with yin and yang energy would be associated with masculine, or be similar to masculine energy, which is what I would personally call active energy. And I try to shift to that terminology of active and receptive energy versus masculine and feminine energy, or yin and yang energy. They're all somewhat interchangeable, although there's lots of things going on with yin and yang in that system that I'm not touching on, but in a really surface way, we can associate masculine, yang, active, forward pushing energy. So that traditionally, not everybody has the same ways of doing this, but traditionally fire and air are considered to be masculine, active, yang type energies that are moving and pushing forward. Whereas water and earth are more associated with feminine, receptive, yin type energy. Now, of course, all energy has aspects, as well as human beings have aspects of masculine and feminine energy within us, right? So if we take water, if we say, okay, water, it's to do with our emotions, it's to do with the waters flowing and the streams bubbling. Well, it's also to do with hurricanes, although that's a combination of air with water, right? But the force of the tides of the ocean can wear away cliff faces, can change the aspect of continents, right? Can capsize ships and all kind of things that go on. Water can be both powerfully active as well as very calm and receptive. Fire can be very a nice little fire with we can put our hands over and warm our hands up, and it can be a raging forest fire, right? Now I'm having the Mulan song in my head. We must be swift as that raging fire, mysterious as the dark side of the moon. I love Mulan. Anyways, those probably completely wrong lyrics. It's been a while, but so clearly we can't take energy and say this energy here is masculine, yang, active, and this energy over here is receptive, passive, yin, feminine energy, and nothing, they're never going to interchange, intercross, and move about. That's not how the world works. It's not how energy works. But the question is are these types of dualities, and obviously there are more dualities. Zach is talking about how there are other ones as well. We're going to start here and see where we get. So I'm not going to say how far we're going to go into dualities, but the idea of masculine and feminine is a piece of the bigger question of whether or not we see the world in these sets, these dual sets. And this is something, in my opinion, that is pretty embedded into the way in which we see tarot, the way in which we see describe tarot, the way that we understand things. We often have sets. If you look at the major arcana, we almost always have the Emperor and the Empress, right? We have even the High Priestess and the Pope. The High Priestess and the Pope. The High Priestess and the Hierophant, right? So that's a masculine, feminine representation of those more esoteric powers, where we have the Emperor and the Empress as masculine and feminine representations of the more worldly powers and the more physical powers. Of course, we see this often in the court system as well, where we have a queen and a king. Sometimes we have a princess and a prince. The pages are seen often as more feminine, and then we have the knights, which are the masculine, right? So we have these sets going on here where we're seeing the masculine and the feminine energy of those suits. This works, I will say, really well for me. It doesn't work for everybody. And I know that a lot of people are trying to figure out ways to get away from the sense of this or that sort of, it's this or it's that. Because even though we know, right, our brain knows that nothing is this or that we're always this mix and this shift and this movement between different spaces and different types of energy. But I do find that it works well for quickly tapping into the energy of a situation. Is it more predominantly active versus something being more predominantly receptive or passive or receptive energy? I also work a lot with geomancy, and so geomancy is based very strongly on a passive and active energies and fortunate and unfortunate energies. It certainly, in the Western sense, came about or came into the Western minefield, into the Western mindset, esoteric mindset, at a time when those certainly were prominent ways of talking about energy and the way that energy moves. Yes, it is 2 hours. I try not to look at the chat too much the first hour, but because we are an hour early, I know people are going to be confused. But yes, we are an hour early because my mama said I needed to come to a family dinner at a restaurant with some family friends. And she told me that about a half an hour, about 2:30. And I said, okay, Mom, because you're my mom and I listen to you, yes, that means we're going to throw things off a little bit, but it's okay. So I know we're all thrown out of whack. So yes, it's 2 hours. We're just going to go from 3 to 5 so that I have chance to go obey my mother. Obey thy mother, right, in all things, which I don't do, but this thing I can give over. So if you're just coming on, you're very confused, welcome to Saturday. So I think that so number one, I do think this idea of duality and this and that, masculine and feminine, is something that is very strong in the conversation and the way that tarot is set up, the way that we tend to follow those traditional setups, like the court cards, like the sets that we can often find in the major arcana, as I was talking about. Even if you think about looking at the knights, right? Even in the elements, so the earth element and the water element, or the suits, so the cup suit and the pentacle suits, are seen as being the more receptive yin, passive feminine energies, and vice versa. Again, fire and air suits, or the swords and the wand suits, are traditionally seen as the more active, masculine, forward pushing energies. And so, you know, you're going to see that within the suits themselves. And then, of course, then we see that popping in as well into the court cards going on there. So it's fairly prevalent. The sense of duality and masculine feminine energy is pretty prevalent in traditional tarot. And so, you know, the language doesn't bother me. Again, I've shifted mostly to active and receptive versus masculine and feminine, because even though our brains know that we're not talking about gender, right? So when we're talking about masculine, yang, active energy, or feminine, passive, receptive, yin energy, we're not talking about gender. But even though our brain knows that, I think the language of masculine and feminine does feel very gender-based. And certainly that's reflected in our tarot decks, right? When we do very much have male kings and female queens and male princesses, or well, we can, but traditionally we have male princes and female princesses. So even that gender, of course, is the way that that energy is being reflected in our tarot decks. So you could have, and there are decks out there, I don't prefer decks with all females in the decks. However, because that's just personal preference. However, you can take an all-female deck and have very active masculine energy females in the position of kings or the emperor, right? And then the more nurturing, feminine, receptive energy reflections of women in the queen, so to speak, right? So you can do it with a single gender, because we all have, males have masculine and feminine tendencies, females have masculine and feminine tendencies, and in fact, even the use of male and female is, as we have known in the larger social context, kind of not really relative, because we understand gender on more of a continuum than just this and this, right? But that's a whole nother conversation. For today, we're just thinking about, do you still use, like when you're looking at decks, do you look for decks that are balanced to masculine and feminine, active, receptive energy, yin and yang energy? I still do. Like, I still look at for oracle decks and tarot decks to feel very balanced in those energies. And right now, typically those energies are still being expressed through gender. So I don't particularly like an entire deck full of women, even though my head knows that you can use all women and express masculine, feminine, active, receptive energy. It's visually, to me, doesn't look that way. Nor would I want a deck of entirely all males, because again, while you can show nurturing, in fact, a deck that does that really well is the Goddesses and Sirens doesn't. But I will say that the Gods and Titans, the Gods and Titans Oracle deck, which is one of the few Oracle decks with all men in them, I actually think this deck does a pretty good job of showing very receptive energy, male receptive energy and male active energy in a deck full of all men. Using all male gendered people, very, you could even say hyper masculine, hero comic book style men. It does a pretty good job of showing both those energies. But I still don't prefer it. I do prefer to either take people out of the equation altogether and show active and receptive energy, which is kind of where I tend to lean, because it's very hard nowadays to get that that strong balance, especially in oracle decks, with real active, pushing forward movement energy, balanced with that more receptive yin type energy that's there, and everything feel in balance, versus really hyperly divine feminine or very hyperly divine masculine. Can we just see a nice balance? Let's see. I like balancing the deck, but I also enjoy some feminine based decks because gender balance still has not reached in society. Yeah, for sure. But in terms of, if we take it away from, because to me the question's not so much about all female, I'm just using that as an example. But the question for me is more, does the usage of active and receptive to describe the way that energy is moving. Let's think about with the nights, right? So if we take a night, just the 4 nights, right? And we look at the 4 elements that are usually receptive in, or usually depicted in the 4 nights. We have the active or what traditionally masculine energy or yang energy in the air, so the swords and the knights. And if you look at them visually, they tend to look like, oh, they are, running off to save the damsel or the dam. That would still be a female. A male, they're running off to save somebody from distress. The Wands guy, he is, riding off to save the day, to find the next great adventure. And so they are very active. Their horses are generally very much, in full running motion. They are the most active looking of them. With the cups, and especially the pentacles, you'll often see in the pentacles night a very, like a Clydesdale horse, a really heavy, big horse that is just, you could just see the weight where they're just going to take one foot in front of the other, and they're going to plod along, and they're going to do what needs to be done, but they're not running around like crazy like the fire in the air. And even the cups, he is often that knight in shining armor. He's the chivalrous knight. He is the one that most reflects like King Arthur and the Round Table. He's Sir Gawain. He's going to go off to find the Holy Grail, but they're often more not in this high speed motion. We'll often see those. So we can see that we have the knights, which are all active energy, but the active masculine yang energy is forward pushing and moving fast and changing and shifting. And then you have the pentacles and the water suits, which are slower and more passive, more receptive, more open to energy. And so we see this expression of active and passive, or active and receptive, which is my preferred terms, energy. And I do think that that is important, right? So while I'm not like wouldn't make a big call for never use the terms masculine and feminine, because I do think that we know enough to know we're not talking about gender there. And even as it's depicted as gender, I know that the Queen of Cups can come up for anybody, regardless of their gender, and have something to say. And the King of Cups or the Emperor can come up for anybody, regardless of gender. It runs the risk, right, of very much putting a gender focus on energies. And so I do think you see kind of that a little bit of a call to step away from masculine and feminine. For me, the way that I feel like stepping away from that works is, again, going into active and receptive. Is the energy at play forward pushing, active, running forward, transforming, movement, or is the energy at play more receptive, more passive, more open to things occurring to it versus occurring at something else, if that makes sense? So I think that the energy is there, and it's relevant. It's how we express the world around us, but it begins to be but moving maybe away from the gender aspect of that. But it's hard, isn't it? Because I will say, it works really well. Maybe we should put it that way. It's easy, right? So if we look at a deck like a tarot, and again, tarot is a really good example because it is built off of this model, and it does use traditionally gender, men and women, to depict those energies. And so it's really easy to have it laid out in a big reading and be able to see, oh, okay, this is really active energy at play, and this is really receptive energy, and look at how these things are interacting, right? It becomes it's simpler to express those energies through gender, which is so that's it puts, I think, a weight, perhaps maybe, or an extra level of difficulty on creators to figure out how can we express this in a different way that isn't gender-based, and do we even really want that, right? Scrolling back here, masculine and feminine are also they are such loaded terms. I definitely agree, Mr. Jones and Kelly Bear. I guess I don't mind if it's up there. I already saw that. I thought I saw something else by active and receptive is the language I try to use. I do too. I do slip though, especially as I do sometimes read for non-binary friends. I agree. This is why the Numinous Tarot is becoming a fave of mine. It's so well thought out, has removed all gendered language. Callie Bear, would you say then that deck still does a good job of reflecting the active and receptive energy? Because that would be key for me, right? I think you can do it with color as well. I do think that color can be reflective of active energy as well. And I found that a lot of the decks that are starting to try to reframe masculine, feminine energy outside of gender often are the more modern decks that I don't tend to be drawn to as much, right? I do tend to be drawn to the more traditional or more old school, I suppose, type decks, where you can very clearly see it often in gender, which is, I would love to see some other more decks come out that reflect active and receptive, stepping outside of gender, even though I think it's just easiest to do it that way. I use the term active and passive this way. Energy isn't labeled in my mind. Yeah, but it is, like, it's not in your mind. So I'm not saying yes, it is in your mind, but I mean, I think that as coming from esoteric thinking and digging and, you know, the golden dawn and all the things, I think that the language is very built into tarot for masculine and feminine. And so figuring out ways to tap into, because I do think that that is still really important. The idea of active and receptive. I have a little bit of more of an issue with the term passive for me, because passive is, I think somebody just said this, I think Morgan just said the same thing. Passive energy is very different to me than receptive energy, right? Receptive energy is open. So instead of being focused and arrow shooting forward, receptive is that receptacle, like a cup. It's open to be filled. But passive can be more of a turned off. You see this in geomancy as well, when you have the different energies, whether it's a single dot or a double dot, relates more to passivity, more to that energy, the switch being turned off versus turned on. So I try to lean towards active and receptive energy, whereas passive to me is sort of that really neutral space, like nothing is happening, so to speak. And I think it's interesting. I do think that it's an important conversation, because it is how we describe a lot of what's going on in a reading. Is the energy of a reading really forward pushing and active? Is it time to move? Or is it time, right? Is it time to step back and, you know, be still for a moment? It's not the time for forward pushing. Sometimes it's the time for the Four of Swords. Numbers, you can use numbers as a way of reflecting that. And we definitely see that in tarot as well. If you look at the numbers and the pips in tarot, you will see that the odd numbers, and this is also something tied to geomancy and certainly numerology in general, I think, but where you'll look at the odd numbers in tarot, and those are often more active and or shaking up in some way. And then the even numbers are much more receptive or passive or less movement. They're more stable moving numbers. So you can use numbers. I think numbers are a great way to lean into active and passive or active and receptive energy without gender, for sure. It's a serious question, if I may ask. What are your thoughts on God's approval of tarot and geomancy? Okay, so I'm going to approach this as a serious question, because you're asking respectfully. Some people come on and ask the question, and it's not really because they want to know. To be honest, it goes back to a lot of things, because God is a broad concept, right? God and the idea of a God that approves or disapproves is very specific to certain belief systems, the ways that you see the world. And you don't have to just be a Christian or any other of the major religions to have this concept of divinity as something that could approve or disapprove, right? So I don't work with divinity that has any interest of being approving or disapproving. So for me, I'm working far more to do with energy and source. And yes, there is larger energy out there and source energy, but I don't see it as personified as a person that could approve or disapprove. So for me, the question of whether or not God or a divinity approves or disapproves of divination like geomancy or tarot or anything else is a moot point, because it's just not the way that I interact with the world. So whether the case for whether or not your expression of divinity approves or disapproves is going to be completely on each person, and something that they'll have to figure out for themselves, because I certainly am not going to be the authority on whether somebody's divine force approves or disapproves of divination. So hopefully that answers the question, and I hope the spirit in which it was asked. I'm sorry, Mr. Elron. I know you have asked some question. I'm going to scroll back up. What about gender neutral? Well, I think that's the thing, moving the moon. I think that all energy is gender neutral, but it's our words, right? So it's the way that we use masculine, feminine as terminologies, and certainly the way that we use male and female in decks to represent masculine and feminine energy. So I don't think I think that's a very, you're making the point for me, right? That I don't think that any energy is male or female. It's not gendered. It's the language that is gendered, and the way that we depict it, because it's easy to depict the energy. It's easy to depict masculine and feminine, active and receptive energy through gender lenses, right? It just makes it easier. We can easily look at it and say, oh, here's a whole bunch of men that just showed up in the reading. This is a really active, driving energy. Oh, there's a whole bunch of queens here and pages. Oh, this is leaning much more to a receptive, open energy here. It makes it really simple to do that. And I don't think it's a problem if you really keep in your head that we are not talking about gender, that the emperor is going to show up for no matter what gender you associate yourself with. The emperor is going to show up and have something to say and be reflective of you. So the emperor can show up very much so and be reflective of me and the energy that I need to embody as a female, right? And so as long as we keep right? As long as we keep in our head the understanding that men and women on a deck is very often equating to masculine and feminine, aka active and receptive energy, it works, and it works pretty well. For me, it does. It works quite well. But I think we have to then actively be making sure that we don't slip into seeing those things as gender, because then we might miss the point, or we might miss the message. I now have 3 terms: active, receptive, passive, masculine, feminine, neutral. Yeah, you could even do active, receptive, and neutral. That might be a really great way, because I do think passive has, and this is probably due to being a female that was raised in a ultra fundamentalist mindset. So because I was raised that way, the idea of passivity has a negative connotation to the word, just for me, because it's my experience with supposing, I'm supposed to be passive. I'm supposed to be something that other people determine what form I'm going to take and what is appropriate for me to be and what is appropriate for me to do. And I'm just supposed to be this passive force in which all of these things are imprinting on me. So it has for me, passivity has that I think it's problematic for some females that have, again, maybe been raised in that mindset. So whereas neutral, I feel like doesn't have any sort of connotations to it. Neither does active, receptive, and then passive, which is just energy that's not really doing anything at all. It's just laying there. Of course, that asks the question is, can energy ever really be passive, right? Is energy ever not doing something? Because it's probably not the case. It may not be doing as much, but it's probably doing something. But this is nerdy conversation, right? We're having nerdy conversation today. That's possible. That could be like more void energy, Elrond. I like that, right? What is the Children of Lilith? I think the newer deck that has the void card in it, which I really love the concept of the void. It's the liminal space. We talked about the liminal space. And so the neutral energy, or energy that is incubating or at rest, as Groot says, right? I think that's that in-between space, which is really cool. I do like the idea of it being at rest and in that stage of incubation, as Elrond says, because that is a state, I believe, of energy where we are in between, right? So we talked about liminal space. Liminal space is the point between two places of being. And so, but it's still there. There's energy there. And yes, I agree, Morgan. I think that very often the Fool is in that incubating state, right? That's probably the ultimate depiction of that. Although he's in tarot, he's, marching off and going up, but, it's sort of naively plowing forward. So it's less at rest. There's another deck I feel like that might have a card similar to the Void, but I can't picture it. I do leave, I often don't leave. Yeah, what's the deck that the eggs are in? There's an egg in the Moon card in the Wildwood Tarot, I know. Is it the Fountain Tarot? Is the concept of the fountain similar to that? I'll have to look it up. Floor, what if we live in a whole holistic life without labels that might help us with acceptance? I agree with that, Floor, as a concept, right? Because, as a concept, I agree that labels are problematic, right? But the truth of the matter is, in terms of what we're talking of active and receptive energy, and doing readings for other people, and even doing readings for ourselves and processing them, we have to have words, right? We do have to label things to some degree to try to explain or to try to speak to what is going on in the energy that we see in the reading. So while I do think, and it's at a mental space, the idea of not having words or words that divide this or that, this is this type of energy, it sounds like that would be heavenly. It would be very difficult to express, to be able to express energy and express what energy is doing, which is, I think, the whole point of divination. From my own personal perspective. So my personal perspective is when I'm going to go to the table to do any kind of reading, the whole point of the reading is to figure out what is the energy surrounding a particular person or a particular situation. What's that energy doing? Where is that energy without doing anything else? Where is that energy heading? What can we do to shift that energy if we need to shift that energy because for the outcome that we're looking to do. And so in the pursuit of doing those types of things, I think language is very important, right? Mindful Tarot, Lisa has a very interesting about the concept of zero. I'll have to look at that. I love her, says Liz. The Fountain Tarot has a fountain card. Yeah, I don't keep that card. I don't keep very many extra cards in tarot decks. I'm a little bit of a purist that way. But I have to say I do leave the Void in the Children of Litha, and I've really been enjoying it. So there's always the except, right? We always have these, I don't do it this way, but then there's always that one exception that's like, but I really, really, really like this card, so I leave it in anyways. Good. I get that way. Yeah, energy relating. Yeah, the Minciotti decks are really amazing because they have the extra virtue cards in them. They have the extra astrology cards. They have actual element cards in them. Take what works and leave the rest. I know, but for the most part, I don't prefer to have, like, I feel like if you want to make extra cards, make an oracle deck. But that's just me. But I usually try them. The fountain card I left in for a long time, but I feel like there's a different deck that has sort of like a Void concept card, and I just can't remember it at the top of my head right this minute. Okay, so I know this was probably a boring conversation compared to like dreams and liminal space and stuff, but I do think it's interesting for us to think about, right? Because I do think that it's really easy in the world in which all of us inhabit. Most of the people who watch my channel or come to live chats are generally interested in cartomancy of some form or another, right? I can't imagine anybody that would stay following my channel that had no interest in decks of some sort, because because that's what the channel was created for. But So that being said, I do think it's really interesting to think about, right? To think about language and think about because it can be really easy, right, to slide into the genderness of tarot and the genderness of oracle cards, which is a particular pet peeve of mine, right? So it can be really easy to fall into the language of gender and sort of miss the point that it isn't about gender, it's about energy and the way that energy is moving. So that when you do sit down to do that reading for yourself, or you do sit down to do a reading for somebody else, that you don't slip into that, oh, it's the emperor. That doesn't really, I don't see the emperor that way, or I don't really like the emperor because it says patriarchy to me, or it says, really highly over masculized energy or something like that, versus stepping back and saying, okay, wait a minute, the emperor isn't about gender. The emperor is about that really solid state. This is interesting, right? That solid state active energy. It is active energy that has kind of solidified. So then does that push it more towards not being so active? But you could make a case for I don't think he's very receptive, though. I don't think of emperor energy as receptive. They were actively engaged in structure making, so to speak. But we don't want to we want to be careful. Like, a thing about me, I see the Queen of Swords and I'm like, high five, Queen of Swords, high five, Queen of Swords, you and me, right? We're ladies together. I love me the Queen of Swords, but the King of Swords has just as much to say to me as a hyper Libra, hyperized Libra brain. The King of Swords comes up with me just as much as the Queen of Swords does. And so I don't want to ignore the energy of the King of Swords because I'm in a gender sense, I'm relating to the Queen of Swords, right? And so the King of Swords shows up for me probably as much as the Queen of Swords does, because the King of Swords is what I really need, which is to take my crazy brain and actively engage in structure in my crazy brain. Oh, they have they come up for me together all the freaking time. So I do think it's important, right? I don't necessarily, for me personally, I don't feel the need for there to not be gender in tarot decks, right? I work really well with the traditional setup of tarot decks because I can very quickly tap into the active and receptive energies that are at play and how those might move and shift, right? But I think there's a lot more nuances there. Whereas the Queens and the Emperor, like the Empress is one of the cards that I find, and I'm going off by Mr. Elrond, he has to go to his piano. The Empress card is, to me, a little bit of a sad card. Not a sad card. It's sad to see the shift, right? So if you look at older tarot decks, the Empress card was the female, or AKA, we're shifting, right? The receptive personification of power in its full force, right? The power of receptivity, it's because receptive energy can be powerful. And now when we look at Empress cards, it's been shifted to sort of this creative Mother Earth kind of thing, which, let's be honest, is Mother Earth to me as the Empress as sort of a Gaia Mother Earth concept. While I like it visually, I enjoy it, it doesn't really work for me, because Mother Earth, if we want to think about Earth, Mother Earth, Gaia, the Earth as this living entity, that is everything about, that's masculine, that's feminine, that is neutral energy, incubating energy, energy that's at rest, and energy that's raging. Like, it's all of those things. So it would work better in the World card for me than it would in the actual Empress card, because the Empress card is that feminine, receptive, power base. And so it is one of those things that doesn't, I think I would prefer to see empresses going back to their more traditional thing, because we see what we see as the Empress nowadays, we already have in the Queen of Pentacles. And so I feel like it kind of made the Empress a bit redundant in a way. But that's my personal perspective on that shift of the Empress from that very regal, worldly power, as Morgan said. You know, we have the esoteric power in the High Priestess, and we have the very worldly power in the Empress, and then we have Mother Earth literally in the Queen of Pentacles. And then if you want a Gaia card, because I'm all, you know, one of my favorites, let me see if I think it's this one. I think this is the World card. It's one of my favorite World cards. Although I like World cards that just have the world on them too. This is Tarot of the Hidden Realms. And I just love that they have Mother Earth, or Gaia, I think is probably the better way to put it, as the World card. Of course, you know, it's going to be the very last card, because heaven forbid it be at the beginning. Yes, the World card, which is very feminine. So it does take Gaia as being very feminine. But I like that they use, I love that they use the concept of Gaia as the World card, because I think it embodies then all of those things, not just the Empress card. So anyways. Otherwise, that was a rabbit trail, wasn't it? Okay, so I think we can cap Kelly's nerdy talk about it. But I think it's something to think about, and something to think about as you do your readings for yourself or others, and making sure that we don't slip into looking at those cards and those energies as being gendered, but thinking about how are those reflecting the movement of energy in a situation or surrounding a person, because that's, I think, where the key is. So we've been wrapping up our first hours on with doing our weekly cards. So last week our card was the Hierophant, and I loved Roosevelt's quote of, rules are not necessarily sacred, but the principles. Remember, if we find ourselves falling into rules, step back to the principles, which truthfully is kind of what we're doing right now, right? So it's not about the rules of male and female or matriarchy or patriarchy. It's about what is the principle of movements of energy. So we're stepping back. It's that reminder to step back away from, we can get really honed in, right? I think it's probably like just a human thing that we will get zoomed in at hyper labeling. As I said, we have to be careful of those labels. We need labels. They do let us quickly shortcut into bigger concepts. So it's important, but it's really easy to get really focused on those instead of stepping back into the principles, into the bigger space, so that we don't have tunnel vision and miss out on messages, right? So that card is actually relevant even to our conversation today. But we're going to pull a next new card for this week. So let's go ahead and do that. I know I've been babbling while people have been coming in. I know that we are an hour early. I apologize. That's going to mean some people, probably a lot of people, have missed the first hour of chat. And so I do apologize. My mother messaged me half an hour before 3, and fairly insisted I come to dinner with her and my dad and some family friends. And so I'm listening to my mama and so I had to pull it really quickly early so that I could meet up with them for dinner, because my mom doesn't usually say do this very often. So for those of you just coming in and wondering why looks like I've been talking for a while, that's why. So yeah, I do apologize for those that will have to go back and watch the first hour. But sometimes we just have to be flexible and roll with shifts and changes, right? It's a good lesson in flexibility. Claire's little voice told her to tune in early. Well, I'm glad that you listened to your voice, Claire. Okay, so let's pull this week's card and see what we get. All right. Oh, send her in, huh? Phew. What? Ooh, we have the Lover's card. This is, how good is this, right? This is a really good example, right, of some of what we've been talking about, because look at this beautiful painting. So the painting is called Endymion, I think, detail by George Frederick Watt. Sorry, I can't read well with this. Here is the card, which is beautiful. It almost forms a yin-yang sign, right? Because there's a darker shadow of the masculine male here and the lighter, very, very pale skin of the female form here, and it creates that yin-yang sign there. And so the quote here is by Pascal, and it says, "The heart has reasons that reason cannot know." That sometimes, right, we spend an hour, as I just did, having that nerdy conversation about words and labeling and how we do this or we do that and how we put these things in the box and how we know whether this is moving this way or that way. But sometimes, and very oftentimes in divination, right, we need to step out of the reasons, because sometimes the heart just knows what the heart just knows, and we have to listen to those hits. So I really like the quote. I'm going to think about it for a minute as to how it would go with the Lover's card, but it does, because the Lover's card for me is about choice, right? So I don't use the Lover's card really as having anything to do with love. Now, obviously, if I'm doing a reading about a relationship and the Lover's card comes up, it's relevant to love and to the relationship, but it's not the ooey gooey floaty kind of hearts and bubbles part of love. It's about those choices and decisions that we make and whether those things are in balance and unified, which does work with this image and with the yin yang and with the active and receptive, right? Is our decision that we're going to make in alignment with our whole self, our active receptive self, our masculine, feminine parts of our nature? Is it our conscious, our subconscious? Is everything in alignment? Because the decision that we're about to make is one that has long-term ramifications, and we want to make solid, good decisions. And sometimes, according to Pascal, we just have to trust our instinct. We have to say, is this the right decision I'm making, yes or no, and just go with it. Just trust that we're going to make the right decision in the moment. So this week, so with this card coming up this week, pay attention, like when you have to make choices over the coming week. Are you making those decisions in a way that you feel good about, that at that heart level, stepping back from the rules and the bits and pieces and stepping back and just knowing, in that place of knowing, is this the right decision for you to be making? Trust in your heart, trust in your guts, as Erin says, trust your instinct. Find the space to be quiet for a minute. One of the best lessons that I ever learned, because I grew up, as I talked about, very fundamental idea of females. There was always this umbrella analogy, right? Here's the umbrella, and the umbrella is, you've got the umbrella here is God. And then you have the man holding the umbrella, and then you have the woman. And so if you step out from underneath those things, you're going to get struck by lightning, right? So trusting in our own space, our own feelings, our own instincts is actually dangerous, because you are stepping outside of the bounds of somebody else, how somebody else should be determining who you are. And I totally lost my train of thought here, because I had a good point and I lost it. Oh, I lost it. We were talking about trusting your instincts. Okay, yeah, so there we go. I was telling you one of my favorite things. So I had a really hard time with saying no to things, because I was expected to do what was expected of you. And so I had a really hard time saying no to things, to saying no at all, to saying, if somebody asked me to do something, my reaction was always yes. And so one of the best things that I ever learned was to say, I'll get back with you on that, right? To be able to say, because what it did is give me the space over here to have a quiet moment and hear my instinct, hear my reaction, and then be able to react and say, you know what, that's not something that I can do. That's not something I'm interested in doing. I don't have time for that, whatever the situation. But giving yourself space to step out of whatever the situation that causes you to need to make a decision, to step away, because I do believe when we can have a moment of quiet and a moment of stillness, we generally know what we should be doing, but we don't always hear it, number one, because all the other things are too loud, or we don't trust it. And so one of the ways to at least be able to hear it is to step away from the situation for a second, give yourself that space to be able to hear, so that you can make a solid decision. So make sure that you can step out of the space. But over this coming week, we're paying attention to the choices we make because of this card, and making sure that we are making a decision that is in a fully alignment with ourselves, that we feel good about those decisions, there with the Lover's card. So I'm going to put that back in. This is the Art of Life Tarot. We've been using it for quite some time now for our weekly card. I know there's several people that have this deck now, and so they kind of put the same card out for the week, which I love, because it's just kind of cool to know there are other people out there all having this card out. We're all kind of focusing on how, how can this help in some way as we go through the rest of the week. So I quite like that. Sorry. Whilst I take a big drink. Okay, so let me put this in here so I don't lose it. We have successfully navigated the first hour. The Art of Tarot is a comparatively cheap deck. Yeah, I mean, it changes, right? Because I used to say that all of the time. My hair is driving me crazy, folks. How are we going to survive my hair growing out? I used to say that all the time about the Madame Endora, because it was when I bought it, it was such a cheap deck. I really think I paid like no more than 12, but I feel like it was under 12. And that's why I was always saying, oh, just get it. It's an amazing deck and it's so cheap. And I don't think it's so cheap anymore. And so I always say that about the Art of Life too. It's just such a cheap deck, but I haven't looked at it lately to see whether maybe it's more expensive than it was at the time. Kelly has single-handedly depleted my funds. I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. Okay. I'm sure I missed things because you know me. I'm very single-minded. I'm very single-minded in the first hour, so I missed things. So if you have any kind of questions that I missed or you were waiting for, now is the time to have the crazy talk about anything. Let's talk whatever we want to talk about, which usually devolves into talking about decks, doesn't it? Nina Black, that's like me and Kipper and Sibylla cards. I ain't using them. Yeah, Sibylla especially. I definitely agree with Sibylla. But it's very cheeky too. I mean, but it does call you out. And I agree on Madame Endora. Hello, Miss Kaleidoscope. Didn't listen in for long because I was watching Stranger Things. Is there a new one? I've watched the first two. Did one just come out? I don't feel like it. Good Omens book is really good. I was so disappointed. I'm sorry. Don't throw things at me. I didn't particularly like the TV show. I'm going to give it another chance. I haven't yet, but the book is really good. Yeah, Sibylla is me. Me as a friend. Nina says, do you use any protective incantations before your readings or believe in the necessity of that? I do not. I do not use them, and I don't necessarily, I'm not going to say that whether or not that I believe in the necessity of them. I obviously don't feel in the necessity of them for myself. Everybody is obviously, has their own energy workages and spaces and how they want to do things in order to keep their energy in their area, in their space clear. And so I'm not saying that there isn't any use for them, but for myself, it's not part of my practice. But some of that is because my space is kept very energetically clean. I have a lot of crystals around my reading space. I routinely clean space. I have my whole life, even before I knew anything about esoteric-y, new agey stuff. I've always been a person who cleansed my space because of fairy tales and folk tales, folks. Listen to the old stories. They tell you what to do, right? So I always have kept iron. I've always used salt in every single room in my house. I've always smudged in some form or another my whole life. My kids grew up waking up with me smudging windows and things like that's just parcel of cleaning house for me, so to speak. So because I already do all those things on a very routine basis, I don't feel any particular need or necessity to do anything like that. So but that's my worldview, right? So I would certainly not say that somebody else who uses incantations a lot and does things like that might be a thing that they do on a routine basis. The other thing is what we talked about a couple different times is the fact that how somebody uses the tool of tarot is going to be more the reason whether or not they should do protective things, right? So if I'm just tapping into the web in the collective unconscious and checking out energy flows, that's one thing. If somebody's using the tool of tarot or pendulum or whatever they're using to contact outside spirits or entities or something, they may want to rethink how they do those things, right? So the tarot and divination, these types of things are tools. And I think that how you use them and what you're using them for is probably going to be more important to whether or not what you feel like you need to do that way. Hopefully that answered your question halfway decently. But in terms of what you're just saying here, Miss Nina, I would say you do it your way. Do you? Okay. There's a third one. I don't know. Did it just come out, Miss Kaleidoscope? So maybe I haven't. If it just came out, I haven't seen it. But if it's been out for a few months, I have caught up on that. Darlene says, how do you find your totem animal? You do not have to. Sorry for the second hour is as going to everything's going to be off topic, so no apologies needed. That's a great question. Maybe we should have a top. I'm creating lists for topics. I think animal energy and totem, animal spirit energy is probably my preferred way of saying it. That's another thing that I think would be an interesting topic. Where did I put that? Here we go. Animal spirit. I'm just adding it in because that could be a good conversation. I think that the answer to that question, how do you find your totem, right? That is, again, something that is going to be different, right? That's going to be different for every person. Mine has just always been there. literally always been there. And or there were occasions throughout my life they just showed up without asking, or I didn't go off on a vision quest, which would be a particular practice of a particular Native American tribe. Not all tribes do that. Not all First Nation tribes do that, but certain ones do. So that would be one way, right, that you could, and it's not, there are also Celtic, if you look into Celtic stories and lore, this idea of meeting animal guides and messengers is something that you find in many different cultures, right? And so whether you go on sort of doing a journey where you might meditate or sit in quiet and in visualization to meet an animal guide, or whether you set that intention before you go to sleep. We talked a little about, and when we talked about dreams, about how you can sort of set the intention, right? You can set the intention of what your dreams are going to be, and you might set the intention of, we have just got lots that we have to deal with today for some reason. Sorry, Mr. Jones. I feel like you're having to work double time. So yeah, it's pretty, pretty intense today. So my point is, you can set your intentions to meet that in a dream space as well. So I would say that there are so many different ways that might be something that works for you. I think personally, I think that the first step is to be aware, right? So if you're just thinking about, you know, I'm interested in see what is the animal energy around me that is there to support me, and being able to start to pay attention that you're seeing a lot of things with, let's say, or I think somebody just said theirs was a skunk. Maybe it was Claire. Somebody said that, right? And so, you know, you might all of a sudden start to see skunks on billboards and skunks on commercials in the TV, and every movie that you watch has a skunk in it, and they're showing up in your dreams, and so on and so forth, right? So that you might just start to see a particular animal theme repeating over and over again, and that's something to pay attention to. For example, when I started really working with spider energy, it's because spiders were showing up everywhere. Every single deck that had a spider, the spider card would come up. I was seeing lots and lots of spiders, extra interactions with them in real life. I was seeing flipping channels and running into spider stories. You know, it just comes where it just starts to show up a lot. So that can happen. And then you're just kind of open yourself. Okay, well, what could that mean? Like, what kind of message would that have to do? What do I need to learn from this experience, right? So it may happen that way when you become open to paying attention to all the things that are around you. You could use, obviously, an oracle deck, right? You can use an oracle deck and do a reading for an animal oracle deck, and do a reading for what is particular animal energy that I could be working with right now that could be helpful and supportive to myself, right? So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can approach that. And it's not a right or a wrong way. And I also will say that sometimes there's multi layers, right? So I have certain animals that I've worked with for most of my life. So bear and wolf, definitely bear and wolf for most of my life, and certainly raven, crow from a very young adult age up until now, and I'm in my 50s. So, right. So those three have stayed primarily there all of the time. They have different roles. But then there's all kinds of energy that comes in and out through either readings that I'm doing, or that I'm seeing, or that I'm paying attention to things showing up. Those are coming in and out, right? And they are because I have something that I need to learn. So crocodile, you know, I had crocodile for quite some time, where that kind of energy and decks, images and decks, images on TV, things like that were showing up because there was a lesson that I needed to learn from crocodile, which, as I think Aaron was just saying, isn't a particularly fluffy animal energy to come up, but it was really important. It really was focused on this patient energy and waiting for that right moment, and then going in for the grab, which again, watch alligators and crocodiles. That's not really beautiful. Oh, it's just such pretty energy here. It's not. It's very powerful. Once they grab hold, they do not let go, right? And so, but it was really important to what was going on at the time. I needed patience. I needed to really wait and be aware and be constantly aware of my surroundings so that when that moment came, I was ready to grab hold. So it was really important energy, but when that time period was done, that kind of went away. It was just there for a particular space that I needed that energy, right? So you have some often that you might have with you your whole life, and then you should have, if you start to pay attention, there'll be all kinds of other animal energy that you can make use of and have as a support system in and out, depending on what your situation has to do. So let's see. I'm trying to see. I'm sure I've missed something here. I really don't consider an animal a guide unless I have experience with them in real life. Yes. I always like to respond to things just what I'm thinking, but for, not to discount for you that probably works really well. For me, or in my way of thinking, I think that would be really hard for a lot of people. That would say that if you couldn't run into a particular animal, that animal couldn't be a long-term energy that you could work with. And certainly a lot of animal spirit totem, terminology is very problematic with the whole animal energy. There's not a way in which I have found to be comfortable with. For me, it's animal support. It's animal spirit support, animal soul support. I don't know. I haven't come up with it. What's a good terminology that's outside any one particular way of looking at things. But most of those things, if you look at them in an esoteric, like if you look at, say, mythology, of course, I'm just more familiar with it, but if you look at it in terms of, say, Celtic mythology or even Norse mythology, other mythologies that have a lot of animal energy in them, a lot of it's happening within the liminal space, right? A lot of it's happening in that other space. And so you don't necessarily, for me, because that's my worldview, you wouldn't necessarily have to meet them in the physical world for it to be an energy that could be really powerful for you and be one that you work with your entire life, because it's more about the energy than the physical animal. I do see there is a difference between a bear out in the wild and a bear energy that I've been working with my whole life, right? So if I meet a bear out in the woods, I'm not going to be running up and saying, "Oh my gosh, I have been, you've been working with me since I was a little girl, and I'm so excited to finally get to meet you in person because it will probably eat me or maul me or, something that will not be a fun situation." Because to me, exactly, Sherry. That's when you play dead. I do for me, there is a big difference between the natural animals of the world and working with animal spirit or animal energy is almost like. My personal mythology is that we have the forest, but then we have the forest that is in that space just left or right of center when you're entering into the primeval forest. And so you have animals that we see about today, and then we have animals that exist in that forest space, that old energy that's left or right of center, so to speak, dimensionally. And so anyways, but I do think it's powerful. Now, I'm again, don't want to discount because everybody is going to approach those things differently. But because I will say, was it Sherry that said that? I'm so bad. I'm sorry. Things are already turning. Crow has been an energy that I've worked with forever in a very powerful way. But I will say that when I do run into crows and ravens in real life, it's a really powerful experience. But again, I'm not running up to any wolves or bears and giving them a hug. Oh, it was Sherry. I think it was Sherry Berger said that. In my opinion, the form they assume is also part of the message you're delivering. Yeah. So it kind of gets into that more, if you look at the Brian Froud's Fairy Oracle, I love some of the ones that are just energetic, right? It's this idea of that really old energy that is about in the world, right? Which is, how I see Fae and that type of thing. There's this very old earthy energy. And the form that it takes may be a bear, because it makes sense to the way that I process bear energy or whatever that might be, that because of whatever they're trying to get across or be there for, that taking that form, it just works and it makes more sense, and it's a way it communicates what they're there for more. So that makes good sense, Mr. Aaron, as well. Somebody asked whether playing dead really work with bears. I have zero idea. I don't know. It would be so hard, wouldn't it? If you're really faced with like a giant grizzly bear, can you imagine how hard it must be to just lay down and curl up? Because every instinct in you is going to be to run. Now, I do know you're supposed to back away, but I don't know. So I would say don't take my advice on how to survive a bear attack, because I don't know. And I'm not giving any advice. Well, Kelly said for me to just sit down cross-legged and start to meditate when I see a bear. No, Kelly said nothing about how to survive a bear attack. Yeah, I've heard, Tammy Pie, I've heard that you're just supposed to maintain eye contact, which you wouldn't be doing if you curled up in a ball, or back away. I have no clue. And what you should do and what we probably will do is probably very different. Because you also could say, just run at them, right? I've heard that before. Just make yourself really big and scream and run at them. I don't know if that's I don't know if moving closer is ever going to be a good idea. I don't know. Maybe if you're in a place in which there are a likelihood that you're going to meet a bear, maybe you should have a bear horn or bear spray or something. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. Yeah, climbing a tree is probably not going to work either with a bear. Kelly's the tiger's the best. I'm back. Have y'all talked about Majestic Earth Tarot? No, we haven't, Zach, or Mr. Jones, whoever's at, because either one of you could be very much the one who wants to talk about that. No, I just can't wait for it. That's all I have to say for it. I know the first 100 of the early bird backers. Zach is asking, but you're thinking it, Mr. Jones. I know the first 100 of the early bird backers went out. I haven't gotten mine. I checked this morning. I know I was in the early bird because that was an instant purchase for me. So I know I'm in the early bird category, but I haven't gotten a deck, so I'm guessing I wasn't one of the first 100s. Bear climb trees wherever you want to. Whatever you might want to use to distance yourself from the ground. Yeah, I'm not getting in a tree around a bear. Once watered into a troop of baboons, they can be really, that's scary. I kept walking calmly and didn't see, that's the thing, Miss Kaleidoscope. Sometimes you're supposed to make eye contact. Sometimes you're not supposed to make eye contact. There's just too many rules. I'm sure I wouldn't remember any of them. Mr. Jones, I can see Kelly swinging a mace. No, the mace I'm talking about. I just heard people use, it's like mace, like you spray in people's faces. But it's got a higher trajectory. So you don't have to get as close to the bear, I'm guessing. And so that it will have an impact on a bear versus a human being, is what my guess is. Again, do not take survival advice other than, like, don't eat food in the fairyland. Things like that you can take my advice from. Some zombie survival things you can take my advice from. But survival of animal encounters, I am not the person to ask. Tammy says, if they really want to eat you, they're gonna. Exactly. Exactly. This conversation is solidifying my forest phobia. There are not bears in all forests, Nina. It's okay. You just have to be aware of where you are and what are the animals that you might encounter so you can prepare. The bear I was face to face with ran when I screamed, said Sherry Bug. So yeah, I mean, who knows? And truthfully, it's probably, let's be honest, there's probably different types of bears, right? This particular bear might be particularly crabby, and if I come running at it and screaming at it, it's just going to eat me. Whereas another bear might be a more skittish variety, more gentle bear, and when I go screaming and yelling at it, it may turn around and run. Like, I don't think there's probably ever like just one solution that is going to save your hide. I can't. I can't. That's my guesstimate, is that not all bears have the same personalities either. Can I just say that the Muse Tarot is coming up? Oh, I did not know that, Mr. Jones Davy. Nope, I didn't know. Sharks. I do love sharks. Not that I want to swim with a shark like Miss So Sherry Bug wants to swim with the sharks. I don't really want to swim with the sharks, but I do love sharks. And I don't think sharks are evil or anything like that. I mean, if we are in an animal's environment, it is on us. It is up to us to behave accordingly and safely. Didn't some wilderness guy, I'm sure. One I know of for sure, but I'm sure there's been multiple that have. And while I think those things are sad, like obviously it's sad that the person died, I think the person was also well aware of the risks and decided to live their life the way they wanted to live anyways, and more power to them is kind of how I feel about that. I was running around in the forest and I saw some sky. I ran back to my car. I have no idea what kind it was. Yeah. Anything with teeth could either bite you. Yeah. Again, I do think there are just certain places, right, that, you have to know what is the biggest predator. In the streets of a, dark streets of a city, the biggest predator might be another human being, and most likely will be another human being. Being in the middle of a forest that is highly populated with bears, probably going to have a risk involved with bears. If you're going to be kicking your legs around and screaming and things in the water where there are sharks, then beware the shark, right? Beware the man, beware the bear, beware the shark, beware whatever is at the top of the food chain for where you are, and be smart, right? It's on us to navigate our world as safely as possible. Hello, Miss Veronica. You're not late, sweetie. I'm early. My mom wanted me to come to dinner, and so I said yes, mother, and we started early. So a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to be like, I'd still be terrified of human beings in forest too. This is true, Miss. That's true, Aaron. Very, very true. We do, yeah. We take a risk, yeah. I mean, and there's risks all over the place, right? Not just from animals. Life is a risk, and we have to, manage that risk as best we can, and then the rest is just up to the way things are going to go, right? Okay, so let me see. I don't know if I answered the question about the I don't know if Zach ever said anything about the Majestic Earth. Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is that I'm very excited about it. I'm not watching any walkthroughs. I think there's 1 or 2 walkthroughs up, and I know that I've seen that there are some people on Instagram that have it, and I am studiously ignoring them, which is ridiculous because obviously people often have to studiously ignore my videos, and I'm fine with that and understand it. But I am trying to studiously ignore any walkthroughs of the Majestic Earth until I can do my walkthrough because it's the deck I've been waiting for a while now. Okay, so that was that question. Again, if I missed a question talking about or not talking about how to save yourself from a bear attack, feel free to repeat yourself because we went from how do you find your animal energy spirit guide to how do you survive a bear attack and a shark attack, and today it's how can we survive the creepy humans that seem to be flocking today. Tammy Pie is waiting for 2 more Kickstarters. I think I only have 2 Kickstarters. The Majestic Earth, which should be shipping in the next couple weeks, and a playing card deck that I am most excited about also. So those are I think there's only 2 I have. I've thrown out 40% of my stuff this way. I've gotten rid of 0% of my tarot decks and books. I wonder, Miss Veronica. I've done the whole, reduced like by that percentage too, but not of decks, although I have a bag started. I've seen Grizzly Adams back in the day. But not when it was out because I didn't have a TV from, I don't know. That would have had to have been 2nd or 3rd grade, maybe even 1st or 2nd grade, maybe even kindergarten, maybe 1st grade, 2nd grade. I know that I saw some episodes of Land of the Lost and Lost in Space. I used to watch those we had a little black and white TV. So I don't know when those came out, but shortly thereafter, then I didn't have a TV again until I was married. So I missed a lot of television until retroactively watching things. The only things I remember watching on TV, I remember watching the black and white version of the werewolf movie that was so sad when the guy gets killed as a werewolf and he's like laying there on the ground and he turns back into his human form. I just remember being so sad. It started my, empathy for the monster, right? So I remember seeing that when I was a kid. And I also remember seeing Land of the Lost and Lost in Space in black and white. That was the only thing I remember watching on television. And the movie theaters, I remember watching Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. I remember watching that. And I remember watching this. I think I saw the first 2. I don't remember for the 3rd one I saw in the movie theater, the Star Wars. And those are the only things I remember. After that, I didn't have a TV or go to movies until I was married. I know, I can't wait to see your reading route too, Miss Veronica. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll back here, which I should never, ever do. One Step Beyond and The Outer Limits. I think my TV shows, a lot of those old shows now, do they? I do remember a lot of, we would listen to a lot of radio shows, like on tapes, like they replay like The Shadow, like who knows what lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. I remember listening to that, and of course the old War of the Worlds, like the original radio broadcast things. We used to listen to a lot of the old radio broadcast shows. Isn't it interesting how seeing a movie about a werewolf as a child, it has definitely Sherry Bug. There's no question. Well, it was also the bear in the corner of the room that kind of had that. At first was really scary until I realized it was protective energy and guardian type energy. So that was my first memory. And then the werewolf I was very young because I remember my dad promised. So like we could only watch it if my brother would let me sleep with him that night because I'd be scared. And I was quite young, but I just remember being so sad because it wasn't the guy's fault, and here he was hunted down and they killed him, and I just remember being so sad for that werewolf, and it has very much informed a great deal of the way that I think in a lot of my time of study and school was about this idea of creating the other, and then kicking that other out and putting the things that we're afraid of onto somebody else and causing and giving them all that pain, and the idea of a sin eater and those types of things. That's something that has long been a theme of interest to me, and it must stem from those very, very early memories, which is so fascinating. It is fascinating. Sherrybug, Miss Sherrybug, it's very fascinating. Let's see. I don't know. So start checking people. I don't know what we're talking about there. I have no clue what Miss Tammy Pie is talking about. Anyways, it never works for me to roll back up. I don't have the actual Soprafino, so and I've looked at it. The reason I haven't gotten it is because I love this version. So the Ancient Italian Tarot by Lo Scarabeo is the majors of the Soprafino, which is from 1835. And it is the minors from another deck, which is, I always forget this one, the Avando, which is from 1880. So they've taken the minors from one and the majors from another and pushed it together. And I prefer this deck because it has... I love the minors, and I love the minors better than the original Soprafina minors, and I love the majors, which are the Soprafina. So it's like the perfect. I mean, I just love this deck, and I love the minors of this deck more than the Soprafinos. Soprafina's minors are beautiful, but not as beautiful as these. I mean, it's just it's like perfect. It's like they made a perfect deck by merging these two decks together. But that's, I'm trying to find some other examples of pretty minors. They're just beautiful. Yeah, it's a mashup deck, but it's like a beautiful mashup. It's got the curved swords, which is my preference. Beautiful curved swords. It has beautiful cups. It's just a perfect melding. Look at the beautiful Queen of Cups. It's just a perfect melding. Go Lo Scarabeo. They did, I think, an amazing job. But that's me, right? Somebody else would be like, "Oh my gosh, like that is a horrible sin against tarot to mash those two decks together," right? So, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? Don't tell Kelly, but I'm not a fan. What are you not a fan of? Now I gotta scroll back up. Ancient Time. Yeah, he's not a fan of this. Well, that just means I just get to have all the preciousness. Can I ask folks what is up with the Radiant Wise Rider-Waite Smith? I bought it and hated it. I sent it back. I don't know. I'm not a Rider-Waite Smith person. My favorite is the Centennial. I do like the AGM, which you can't get the English version. I do really like that, but my favorite is the Centennial version of the Rider-Waite Smith. What is a mashup deck, March? I think it's just like, do you think about like the Monster Mash? You can see I'm getting excited about Halloween, right? Or all of October, Embrace the Magical. I mean, it'd be like a song mashup. It's taking two pieces and shoving them together, right? So you have the majors from one and the minors from another deck, and they put them both together and mashed it into a new deck. Deck of the Bastards would be a really good example of that. I believe that's more than 2 decks, right? Isn't that? I think that has the courts from one, the pips from another, and the majors from another. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's 3 different decks at least that it's mashed into the Deck of the Bastard, which is a cool concept, and I think something that medieval people would really appreciate. In my opinion, not that I know anything about that kind of stuff. Yeah, a lot of the Rider-Waite-Smiths for me are very garish, so I don't like the yellow tones in them very often, but that's just me. It's not my favorite. I appreciate it. I appreciate what it had to offer to tarot, and I appreciate Pixie's work, especially her other illustrations in like books I really like, but it's just not, artistically, it's not a deck that I love. No, now Maria's now going to be singing the Monster Mash all day. There's a Dracula deck that has coffin-shaped borders. Yeah, I would hold out. For me, I would be holding out for the Robert Place's Dracula deck. I don't think it's called Dracula. It's a vampire deck anyways. Yeah, there's some good ones. We need more monster decks. I mean, we have Bohemian Gothic. Like, Bohemian Gothic is just doing all the things. It's got werewolves. It's got, it's got Dr. Frankenstein's monster. It has vampires for sure, and those kind of Nefertiti ones. It has creepy children. It's got all kinds of stuff in there. Twisted Tarot Tales has every monster imaginable. Something is up to $375. I'm not sure what Miss Claire is talking about. Probably the Robert Place one. Yeah, that's one of those ones that you never know. You might stumble. I always say, don't give up hope. Just keep watching for it, right? And something you might find it for really cheap. Yes, Mr. Tom Bench. Speaking of monster decks, Mr. Tom Benjamin. Tom Benjamin is making a illustrated, like a digital illustration deck of like a Halloween deck of all kinds of things in there, for sure. Sherry says last year she went on a Halloween deck binge and doesn't really need another one. Yeah, for me, monster decks are not just for Halloween. Like Bohemian Gothic is not relegated to October. It can go anywhere it wants. Same thing with the Halloween Oracle. It works and functions beautifully anywhere. But when they get into the real kitschy, like kitschy Halloween, which is awesome, that just screams Embrace the Magical. The Ancestral Path is my go-to deck this month. Yours and mine too. It's right here. I am absolutely in love with that deck for sure. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. I really love that deck. In Black says Pixie's art's amazing. Yes, I am not discounting Pixie as an artist, just as it's not my favorite tarot deck. It's not my favorite artwork. It's just some of it has to do with the, I would love to have seen like how it would look in, now, because some of it I think has to do with the printing abilities at the time and things like that. But yeah, it's not my go-to. Yeah, small shops. that are definitely, if you can find just like random shops, like tarot shops and shops that holds decks, like London has like 5, I think, in London. But yeah, if you can find places like that that are just smaller shops that can have stock, you can sometimes find those things for just their regular cost of what they would cost. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you just have to have patience. Like if there's that one deck that you're just kind of waiting and watching for, and you don't want, I mean, if you have the money and want to spend a bunch of money on it, go for it, right? I have no issue with that. Everybody, manage their own finances. That's not my problem. Go for it. But if you're, trying, you really want a particular deck, but you don't have or don't want to spend a lot of money on it, a lot of times if you're really patient, then something will just randomly pop up, and you'll be set for it. Christina says, does anyone have Madame Clara's tarot? I just got, Miss Jen had just sent me now Madame Clara, I think, has more than one deck. So she just sent me this one's called Madame Clara's Fate, Destiny, and Fortune deck. But I don't know there's one before this, I think. I'm not sure. I don't know if this is the one you're talking about. I haven't really looked at it closely. I've always wanted it because it feels very Embrace the Magical. Where it has sort of these little banners. I mean, it's just so Embrace the Magical, right? It's like you're going to I'm trying to find some of the majors. I haven't even really had a chance to look at it all. Here's the King of Cups. And it has the little flags on it. It says, like this one says, for the King of Cups, friends and family are in need of your command and balance. And then if it's reversed, you have the second sets of lines. And this one says, I cannot even read that with these bad glasses. Some fits of volatility will result in losing much more than control. So if it's upside down, the King of Cups is out of control. Something like that. But it just feels like you're going to go to the fair and you're going to get a reading from a fortune teller. I absolutely love the vibe a lot. I'm trying to find a major. Like, look at the Empress. Doesn't she look awesome? They just look very cool. Very cool. I'm all for embracing the magical. Look at the Hermit. Looks like a woman. I like her. So yeah, I don't know if that's the one you're talking about, whoever asked about it. It's the Madame Clara's Fate, Destiny, and Fortune deck. That somebody asked about. Now I don't remember who asked. Somebody asked about it. I'm sorry, I can't find it now. Somebody asked me that question, and now I can't find it. Is it like Madame Endora? It kind of, I don't know, Miss Nina. I literally just got it yesterday, so I don't have. It has the same feel of like going to a fortune teller that Madame Endora's has, but I haven't used it, so I can't really speak to that. For me, it wouldn't trump Madame Endora's because that just has a whole package. It's just the colors and it reads amazing. Like Madame Endora's reads amazingly. But I just haven't had this long enough to know anything else but to show you that. My humorous deck is going to be the Gamma Terry. People have gone off, I think, on talking about random weird decks like Porn Stashes and the Morgan Greer, as well as one being in Terror of the Hidden Realms. Oh, Christina asked me. I don't know if that's the one you were talking about. Alchemy's Arrow. Hello, sweetie. Sorry if you talked about it already, but have you seen the new Dark Crystal? I have not seen it yet. I started to watch it, and I was not like I didn't have focused attention. I was multitasking, or I was still kind of multitasking, and I felt like I was missing out on the experience, so I stopped watching it. But I haven't gotten back to it yet to watch it, but it is definitely on my list. Yes, Dark Crystal Undone is amazing. Yeah, it felt like the original. I did rewatch the original not too long ago, and so in preparation for being able to see the new one that came out. But I started to watch and I thought, you're missing this. You're not, focus. So stop and come back when you can actually enjoy it. And I just haven't done it yet. I know I'm gonna love it. That's why I didn't want to ruin it by like half. Not watching, being fully engaged in the experience. So I have to go back and watch it. Scrolling up. Never a good thing, because then I get lost. I think they're talking about Halloween tarots, different fun decks that they could do. I don't know if I've watched Undone, Tammy Pie. I need to look at that and see what that is. Undone on Netflix. It sounds familiar. Did we talk yet about? Have we talked yet about Carnival Row? Undone. I don't know if I watched this yet. Oh, I don't think I've watched this. I will be watching this. That looks really cool. I think I was waiting for it, and maybe I didn't realize it was out now. Inspired by Sherry, what decks make you giggle, said Mr. Jones. Definitely Bohemian Gothic. Now, Bohemian Gothic isn't just funny, but it's quirky, and it does make me laugh sometimes. And it's less about giggling because it's like a funny deck, and it just hits me in the inner child. It does make me, it brings that pure joy aspect. So definitely Bohemian Gothic. That's the first one that pops to mind when I think about that type of a deck. And it's really the main one. I can't think of another one that makes me giggle. I can't think of one at the moment. So I'm gonna go with Bohemian Gothic, but I don't want that to make the assumption that it is a light-hearted deck or a funny deck or like a gummy bear deck, which I saw somebody mentioning. Is not a gummy bear deck. It's really a powerful deck, and it plays with pieces of light and darkness, shadow pieces beautifully. It's a beautiful deck, but it just makes me smile, and it just I just love it so much. So yeah, I'll go with that one. Kelly, there's a new 25-year anniversary fairy volume by Brian Farr with his personal commentary. Oh, I would definitely like to see that. I'll have to watch for that. Thank you, Alchemy's Arrow. I just love his stuff. I have had my two fairy decks at the moment are mixed, but it's too funny because I've had them mixed for a while because I have a reading called Walk in the Woods, which can I just say to everybody who's gotten it, I thank you, because it has been the most amazing experience for me. It's literally built up this woods in my liminal space, in the space in which I inhabit when I'm not here or there. It's literally built this entire woods. It's just been, I'll have to do a whole video talking about it sometime or maybe I'll write a blog post. I'm trying to reinvent my blog post, and I don't know, it's gonna be really hard to try to explain it, but it's been an amazing experience. But anyways, I've been using the Brian Froud deck for part of that, so I've done quite a few readings with it, and generally that's a deck that I read a lot for myself, but I don't read a ton of for other people. But because of this particular reading, I've been reading a bunch, reading with it a lot for other people. So I mix the two decks together, but every single time. Not at first, like the first couple readings that I did, I was getting from the Fairies Oracle, the first version, or I don't know which one was first or second, but it was the Fairies Oracle. I kept getting Fairies Oracle, but then after that, every single pull is Heart of Fairies. Every single one, because I have said Heart of Fairies is the oldest, one of the oldest Oracle decks that I have from way back in the back of the Beyond Day, right? But I've always said that I like the Fairies Oracle more. So now what happens is all I get is Heart of Fairy. This is the personality of the Brian Froud's Fairy Oracle decks. Hello, Mr. Simon. We're about ready to wrap up. It is actually, I came on early because my mother said so. I'm going to go to dinner with my mom and my dad and some old family friends. Let's use this one because we're talking about fun decks. This isn't really a fun deck, but it's a sweet deck. So why not? My mom wanted me to go out to dinner with her and my dad and some old family friends. And so I came on an hour early so that I could listen to my lovely mother. And so yeah, we're actually getting ready to wrap up so I can quickly freshen up and go meet the fam for dinner. So yeah, so we're using the Magical Times Empowerment cards. I bought this, I used this for a whole month. So December is a hard month for me. It's the month my son died. So it has his death anniversary in it. And leading up to Christmas, which was just it was a terrible time. It was need we explain further. It was a bad month, and ever since December's are very hard for me. And so I generally pick up a deck that I'm going to work with during that month, and they tend to be more inner child related, like the Cracked Amethyst Idiosynchro deck I used 1 month of December. This is one I bought specifically to work that would just be supportive and good and sweet, and just and it worked. It's a great little deck. I don't want to say little deck, like, oh, it's a sweet little deck and like it's discounted. It was really a good deck for me during that time, and I love it. So yeah, plus I just love her artwork. I love Jody Bergsma artwork, and her animal deck, which is the Spirit of the Animals, is one of my all-time favorite animal decks. I don't know why I put everything to my face. I've noticed if I look in old videos that if I've like got a new deck or crystal or something, I feel like I put it to my face. Like, oh, it's such a nice deck. It's kind of ridiculous. Alchemy's Arrow, Magical Times with the deck my mom and I shared in her. That does not surprise me, Alchemy's Arrow. A, I feel like we like a lot of the same decks. And B, I think it would be really good there. Like it's been very good support in healing and support in grief kind of deck for me. And you wouldn't think so, right? Because you feel like, would you look on the shelf and say, oh, that's be a great deck for that? Not necessarily, but it worked. It did the trick, and I still pull it out for that all the time. I have enough decks to read for a full month every day. Nice, Sherry. Are you going to do that 1 month? Like do that every day? Every day read with one maybe? Oh, well, you have more than 30. So you could read for like what, like a half a year or something. I got the recommendation for you. Oh, gosh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. I don't remember what made me get it. I think it was Jody Bergsma's art. I just really love her art. It's extremely healing and beautiful. It's just something about her art. I followed her, I watched like her painting and stuff on her YouTube channel and stuff. I really think it had a lot to do with her art. It just felt like what I needed for that month, and it's been really good for that. June's Tarot. I'm aching. I feel flat. Oh no! Oh, June. I don't know if your name is June. It's June's Tarot, but so I'm going to guess maybe June. But I'm so sorry to hear that. That is terrible. And yes, I hope you feel better soon. Yes, I do. Alchemy's Tarot. I've got the first part of a review done on it. I haven't gone through the rest of it. I've been using that to connect with ancestors of the land. I've got a video started about it, but I've had it for a long time. I've just not done a video about it. So I've got the first part. I haven't gone through the cards yet. I'm so sorry. She said, yes, it's June. Yeah, I'm so sorry that you felt like that. I have had a couple hard falls like that, and it's so hard on your body. I hope that you heal up very, very quickly. I'm so sorry to hear that. Okay, I'm going to pull this because I've got to go. I've got to go freshen up to meet my mama and my daddy and my friends, old friends of the family. Nothing, bro. I'm glad to hear that. Just take care of yourself. Okay, so we have dance. Let me get them all out. The second one we have is destiny. Dance towards your destiny. That's a beautiful concept. Like, just dance to destiny, right? I'm always that one that says, dance down the aisle, right? Dance down the aisle of the grocery stores, but instead dance to your destiny. The deck that I'm talking about is Magical Times Empowerment Cards by Jody Bergsma. Okay, so our first card is dance. Find your heart's rhythm. See, that's the thing with dancing. You know, I recently did a walkthrough of the Shaman's Oracle, which is one of my most used oracles deck, and there is a suit of dancers in that deck, and it's such a powerful concept, because if we think about dancing, it is a physical expression of the energy that's around us, right? So when we're hearing the music to the song, and we're hearing the vibration, and we're physically throwing our body into this beautiful movement. That's what dance is. And you have to, you know, tap into the sound and tap into the vibrations. Like, if you ever watch somebody who's deaf dancing, it's the most amazing thing, because they are, probably my mom saying, don't forget to come. It's the most, they're tapping into the vibrations that are all around them, and they're feeling, probably there's, you know, the senses, other senses are heightened, so they're feeling the energy. They're so in tune, and their body, they're moving their body to that. So it, you know, we think of dance like, oh, you know, like I just did, like, oh, it's so great, yeah, dance to your destiny, which is true on one hand, but it's really powerful. And the use of physical movement and tapping into the sounds and the vibrations and the waves around you to dance is empowering. I don't know about you, like, I'm really big on, and I am not like a good dancer or anything. I'm an exuberant dancer, but I'm not by any means a good dancer. But there is something so powerful that I can be in like a amazingly uplifted mood and start to just like go all in on dancing, and it can make me start to cry. Not in a bad way, like it's made me sad, but it's like so overwhelming when you like throw yourself into expressing yourself through like this physical movement, right? That is so powerful. And of course, we see this in energetic dancings and drummings and all of that. You know, we can see how powerful an expression dance can be. So my point is that dance can be freeing and beautiful and this high light expression, but it can also be really powerful because it causes us to tap into these big rhythms and these big vibrations that are all around us. So that is beautiful and powerful. We have the Destiny card here. Oops, I froze up for a second. We have the Destiny card next. Dance with the Dolphins. Yes, please, right? Yes, please. Understand that as we tap into and as we tune into those energies around us, in my opinion, is going to automatically put us into, if we're paying attention to the energy around us and expressing that, going inward, feeling outward, and we're such in tune with those energies that we're dancing with those energies, it is going to, I believe, automatically move us towards our destiny, move us in the direction that we should be moving. And it's like with Joseph Campbell, find your bliss and follow it. Because if you're following your passions, if you're following your bliss, you may not be exactly on track, but you're going to be at least moving in the right direction if you're following your passions and your bliss, right? But I also love that the reading ended with this beautiful solitude card. One of the things I love about Jody Bergsma, obviously she's a painter, and she works with watercolor, so obviously that's important to me. Her use of color in the cards, I think, is beautiful. Like you see this vibrant greens of dancing and the colorations of purples and blue with the dolphins, and then this really soft yellow that just speaks of sanctuary. It's one of the things I think a powerful thing about this deck is her use of color. But anyways, it ends with solitude or with sanctuary and this idea of renewing yourself, because when we're all in on our lives, when we're all in and feeling the energy around us, it can really be powerful experience, right? And it does push us forward in our destiny, but we do sometimes need to step back then, recoup, reground, recenter, and then go back out and dance, right? Then go back out and dance with the dolphins, which is what this basically tells us to do. We're supposed to go dance with the dolphins. I think it's a beautiful reading because it asks us to be in tune with our own inner movings as well as the movings around us. And sometimes being in tune with that is going to push us forward. And sometimes that being in tune with their energy is going to tell us when to step back, right? So if we're paying attention to the energy, we know when we should be dancing frenetically and just powered in. And we also know when we should be sitting back and relaxing and closing our eyes and just feeling the energy. We talked about this one before. Find a song that moves you and lay on the floor, close your eyes, like lay in with your arms just flat down, be comfortable on the floor, eyes closed, and play that music. And it's just such a powerful experience. So I think that what this reading is asking us for is that if we're in tune with our energy, we're going to know the ebb and flow of when we should be physically just expressing and when we should be absorbing. Or do we start this whole conversation? Active and receptive energy. When should we be actively moving in dance? When should we be resting and taking that in and absorbing it and receptive to it? It's beautiful. It's a great deck. I really can't say more than that. It's just a fantastic. Okay, so there we go. I have to run so that I can go, as I said, and meet my mama, listen to my mom, and have dinner with my fam. I hope that you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day. I appreciate those who popped on early. I am sorry to those who missed live the first hour because I so quickly changed it. So I appreciate your patience with that. Thank you, Mr. Jones Davy. It has been a little bit hectic with the unseemly human beings, and I appreciate your work to hammer them. Nikki would have been here. She had forgot to say that, but she had visitors. But so I appreciate the work that Mr. Jones Davy did in hammering lots of things. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. So goodbye. And now I got to end this stream and see you later.